Hey everybody, my name is Ted Forbes. Welcome back to another episode of The Art of Photography. In this episode, we are talking about on-camera flash lighting. We got the holidays coming up and we're sending thousands of photographers out into the world to shoot family events and low lighting and kid pictures. And all they're armed with is their old DSLR and the pop-up flash, the dreaded pop-up flash. The pop-up flash, and actually I had a family member ask me about this recently. I thought it'd make a great episode. This comes with cameras and it's pretty much useless. This is what makes your photos look like a crime scene. This is what causes red-eye problems, and there's a couple reasons for it. The first problem is that you're shooting light directly into somebody's face. This is like taking a flashlight and just boom, go. It's very harsh lighting. It's going to create very hard shadows on facial features. It's going to blow skin out, and it just does not look very pleasing most often. However, cameras do come with them because it's a feature they can sell you. A smarter idea is spending a little bit of money and getting a hot shoe flash, and I want to talk a little bit about what we're looking for in a hot shoe flash, some techniques that you can use, and you really don't have to spend a lot of money to do some small adjustments to make your pictures a lot better. For the purposes of our demonstration here and all the images that we're going to look at in a second, I'm going to shoot on this camera. This is an old Nikon D40. There's nothing special about it. This camera isn't even produced anymore, but I want to show you this because I want to use a lower ISO performance camera that may be more what people actually have. I mean, we'd all love to have a Nikon D4 and be able to go shoot in the dark, but that's not what we're talking about here, and most of us don't have that. It's not really practical or within most of our budgets. So what we're going to do is actually look at some on-camera flashes here, and I have a few things to show you, and then we're going to look at some images. So first up, let's look at what a hot shoe flash is and what you want to look for when buying one. Okay, first up, and sorry, this is a Canon speed light. I'm going to show you my Nikon one in a second. You don't have to buy top of the line when you're doing this. There's just a couple things you want to look for. The first thing you want to look for that's going to make it the easiest is if it has a mode called ITTL, or a mode that's going to communicate with your camera. TTL typically stands for through the lens, and the older film cameras, 35 millimeters, had features that actually let flash metering go through the lens and measure off the film plane to make the correct adjustment for light exposure and to shut the shutter when it had enough. And that ITTL is a little bit more fancy version of that with modern digital cameras. That will make your life really easy. All you have to do is put this in ITTL mode and set your camera to P and shoot away, and you're in shape. The other thing you want to look for, and again, you don't have to get a top of the line flash for this at all. You can get the smaller, more affordable ones for $150, but you do need something that'll do what is called bouncing. You need a swivel head. So if I push the side on here, I can actually move the head, and I can point it straight up. So when I put this on the camera, the flash head now is aiming up. What this does is this technique called bouncing. It will bounce the light off of the ceiling, and it lets it fall on your subject or subjects, and it's more diffuse. The light is not traveling in straight lines all in the same direction, and this evens out the shadows. It lets the skin tones out a little more, and it gives you a much more pleasing light effect. And so what you want to be able to do is to use that technique of bouncing. And literally what you're doing is you're bouncing off the ceiling, or you could bounce off a wall, but you really want to keep it up when at all possible. Now, the other thing you can look for too, and some of these fancier flashes come with these, it's a little white card that comes up here, and it's called a bounce card. If yours doesn't have one, you don't need it. You can make one. You can make one out of some index cards and some tape. I have a friend who made a really big one. He shoots a lot of events, and he uses his bounce flash. It's made out of foam core. It comes up like that, and it's taped onto the camera, and it looks like a mess. But what this does is it will actually allow a little more light to come off of, you're still bouncing up and off the ceiling, but it allows the white card to bounce a little bit and brighten up the subject's eyes a little bit, brighten up the subject's face, and just adds a little more adjustment. Sometimes when light is coming straight down off the ceiling, just because you have an eyebrow and all, or people who wear glasses, for instance, like me, it's going to create a little bit of shadow. And what you're going to do is create a more pleasing effect if you can just brighten up the eyes just a little bit. So anyway, those are some common bounce techniques. And like I said, you don't need a big, expensive, fancy flash to do this type of photography when you're shooting family events, kids, whatever it is. You just need to be able to bounce, and I prefer to use a card as well. I do have one other thing that I want to show you here, which is the Fong Lightsphere. All right, and it looks like this. It's a very weird contraption. It kind of looks like a big cup holder, like you're going to put a coffee mug in there or something. But this is the Lightsphere 2, I believe, that just came out. It's not expensive. It's probably the best $40 or $50 you're ever going to spend. It's a universal adapter, so it just fits onto any flash. This is actually a Nikon that I'm using here. And what's nice about this is when you actually mount this to the hot shoe of your camera, it kind of looks absurd in some ways, but Fong is a former wedding photographer turned entrepreneur, and he brought a lot of the frustrations that he had and some of the homemade inventions that he made as a wedding photographer and shooting events, and kind of brought it into something that we can now buy as attachments to our flashes. The Lightsphere is great. I've been using this for a couple months now, and as silly as it kind of looks, it's so worth it to get better images. Same principle we've been talking about before. The flash just fires up, bounces off the ceiling, no problem. And what it does is it actually, with these rings in here, it will diffuse the light. It's transparent and allows for a little more power and a little more light to come off of the flash itself. It works a lot like the bounce card does, and it's hard to describe, but I think it hits a little bit bigger of an area, and it's a lot more consistent and really pleasing results of diffuse light. It does come with a dome that you can use for special applications if you're shooting, depending on distance and the group of people and what it is you're trying to shoot. But 99.9% of the time I just shoot without it, and this really is a miracle worker. The other thing that's really cool about it is if you have, and this does require a little bit higher end flash because you do want the swivel head, but if you swivel it off to the side, this is really cool. If you're walking around shooting and you're taking photos that are either landscape or portrait orientation, if you're shooting landscape, if you want to go into portrait, all I have to do is hit the button and flip it over, and because it's round, it's going to be the same viewpoint, and I can keep everything bouncing off the ceiling and not off a wall or turning the bounce card or something like that. So this is really, really cool, and it's a big lifesaver. Now, what do these things look like in actual pictures? We're going to go over the computer and take a look, and I prepared some examples. Again, all these were shot on the D40, and let's have a look and see what the differences in these are. We're going to go through and talk about some of the flash techniques that I was describing earlier in this video. And this is my friend Brett Slater, who is he's a very good friend of mine. He's a Dallas artist. Well, he's bigger than a Dallas artist. He's shown internationally. He's a good guy, and he's a ham and a half. And so he was very nice enough to let me shoot some pictures of him just to show you the flash techniques. This first picture, no flash. This was taken in a very dark stairwell, and so I'm going to show you how we're going to light this and use a flash. This actually was taken in a slightly higher ISO, and it's tough to get a good shot. This is okay lighting, but let's say you're in a room, group shot, holiday party, you're shooting your kids, whatever. The first thing we did is we used the on-camera flash, and this is just the little pop-up on the Nikon D40 that's built into the camera. And as you can see, it's pretty harsh lighting. If you look at the walls in the stairwell, you can see how that light throws down in a very weird, unnatural fashion. You expect a room to be lit from above, not from the camera. And remember, that's positioned right over the lens. You can also see too, and I guess with Brett, who looks like a rock star here, this is kind of a fun throwback Studio 54 kind of look to this. So, maybe you could use that creatively. But you can see, like in the leather jacket, there's too many highlights that pop of it. Even in the sunglasses, look at how you can pretty much see the flash just direct reflecting. And honestly, this camera handles better than most, but it's just not a real good look. It's not a real pleasing look. The skin goes too pale. It lit the wall up in a strange way. And it's just not good lighting. You can also see the heavy shadow, on Brett's neck, and of course he's got longer hair, so you can't see a lot of the face shadows. But cleaned it up right here. This all we're doing here is a bounce. This is no card even. This is just a bounce shot in that stairwell, and you can see vastly. Let me A/B them here. This is with the on-camera flash. Look at especially the hair and the details and the face. This is I'm pointing the flash up towards the ceiling. So it's actually tilted back just a little bit to make sure it goes straight up to the ceiling. But that's all this is bounce flash. You could do this with a $150 flash and in your camera settings. And it just, the composition lacks a little to be desired, but you can see that the light quality is a lot better. And it's diffuse. You look at his jacket, it looks like a leather jacket. It looks much more smooth. The skin tones are better, they're warmer. You don't get reflections in the glasses. Of course, he's facing the opposite direction. Slightly different is if you put a bounce card on here, and notice that I brightened up his face a little bit for this snarky portrait here, but it's the same thing. We're bouncing up towards the ceiling, and I'm using the bounce card. It's that little white card you pull up, and it just basically brings a little more attention into the face area, whereas we didn't really use that here, mainly because he's tilted off to the side. But these are very simple techniques. They don't require expensive gear to do, and already your flash performance is vastly improved. Now, if you want to light up the room more, this is done with the Gary Fong. And I'm using a zoom lens on here, and we're zoomed out to a fairly wide angle. And what I'm doing is I'm using the Gary Fong, but you can see how it had a nice diffuse light, but it really spread it out and it kept a lot of power. There's light coming out of the translucent material towards the subject, but it's also lighting the room with the bounce above, and it's very pleasing. If you had a large group of people in a shot, or you're shooting at a party or something, this is the way to light people up. It's not maybe the best choice of lighting for this shot in a creepy stairwell with my rock star buddy, but you know, you get the idea of what the potential of it can do. This is also done with the Gary Fong. I adjusted the exposure slightly, zoomed in, and you know, zoomed in a little bit, but I really think for, you know, the Gary Fong worked on this, but I think my favorite shots are just with the simple bounce. Of course, this is not a candid situation. I'm in a stairwell shooting more artsy photos of my artsy buddy, but you know, it all depends on what you're going for and what you're wanting to use. And I just think that all of these things, I mean, we haven't looked at anything that's very expensive today at all. You can get a flash for $150. You can spend more if you want, but you can get the Gary Fong on there for, you know, basically $50, and you haven't spent a lot of money, and you know, you're well under really $200 and or $300, somewhere in there, and anyway, and the image quality drastically improves. But like I said, just even with a simple bounce, you can work wonders. So anyway, if you got any questions, let me know. Hit me up on Flickr, or shoot me an email, or tweet me, or whatever. You can find all my details. I have links to everything in the show notes, and I'll put these images there as well. And thanks guys for watching. We'll see you next time.